working. So folks, can you hear Arlene? Go ahead, Arlene, say something.
Hey there, hi everybody.
Okay, can everybody hear Arlene? Go ahead and let me know in the chat box. Okay, Angelique, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Can you hear Arlene?
Yes, it's kind of faint, so just try to speak up, Arlene, please.
Okay, Arlene, take it away.
Take it away. Okay, so today, apparently this is a bonus webinar. It's an introduction to the Alaska's Digital Archives. Do please note the S on the end of archives. I know Julie doesn't think that belongs there, but I do. I'm going to split this up into a few bits. First, some quick history, hopefully, then some generic information about what the Digital Archives is and is not, then on to basic use searching of it, and then I'm told that some of you might be interested in learning more about potentially being a partner. And all of these things are very interwoven, strangely enough, so there may be a bit of back and forth between them. Do feel free to ask me to repeat stuff if I'm not coming through clearly. I am actually using my cell phone on speaker to call you guys, so that's the fun of it. Somebody else is apparently in charge of the slides at this point, so I'm hoping that you will follow me through.
Oh dear, Arlene, I just switched the presenter role to you. I didn't realize you were on your cell phone. Can you present? Can you change it?
I'm looking at the screen, but I don't know if I can't do the
okay.
slide.
Can you change? Can you click on my name and I will switch the slides for you. If you double click on my name and give me back the presenter role.
Maybe. This is just going to be so much fun, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. You know what? This is a lesson in flexibility.
You know what's really interesting is I'm having difficulty. Julie, there's Julie.
Yeah, double click on my name and change role to presenter.
I'm not being offered that as an option. Oh dear.
I don't think I can change myself. Change role to.
Hold on.
Let's see.
Are you seeing my email now?
No.
Oh, that's something I know.
Oh dear. Here, maybe I can do it. Okay. Okay, looks like I changed it myself. Okay.
Oh, hey, look.
Okay.
I see something I recognize.
Okay, wait, Arlene, I did it. I just switched the slides.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So, first up, really quickly, the current project manager for the Digital Archives is Bob Forshaw at UAF. You may know his name. He's been the project manager for a very long time, and we're all very thankful to him for that role. Starting as of July 1st, I will be taking it over from him. So there's our email addresses for now and for in a little bit. I wanted you to be able to see that. Okay, next slide. There we go. Okay, so quick organizational history. It started back in 2002 when the heads of the UAF, UAA libraries, and the Alaska State Library approached our congressional delegation about funding for an update of SLED, the State Library Electronic Doorway, and as a part of, honestly, this computer, and as a part of that, potentially putting some unique Alaskan content online. Senator Stevens arranged for a series of congressional earmarks that provided the startup funding for the project. Initially, since the scope of the project was not yet well defined, and let me tell you, never get money before you know what the project is going to be because you spend a lot of time in meetings. It became known as the Virtual Library Digital Archives, which is how it got the nickname and URL of VILDA, Virtual VILDA. As discussions ensued on spending the funding and getting something going, it finally morphed into we should put some historic Alaskan photos online on the topic of Alaska's Road to Statehood, which then morphed into Alaska's Road to Statehood and Alaska Native History and Cultures. That all led to a ton of meetings, and eventually in 2004, the baseline metadata and website decisions were made, and the first 1,000 or so images went live. These were from the three main partners who had sought out the funding, UAF, UAA, and the State Library. For a variety of reasons, UAA's partnership also included the earliest contributions from the Anchorage Museum as well. So that's who still kind of has the predominance of materials in. Over the past 15 years, the partnership has taken on some more formalized aspects, which it kind of had to. There's a governing board, which consists basically of 2 representatives from each sustaining partner, the people who pay for it every year. That usually means the head of the library as the person responsible for putting in funding, and the person who is usually the primary point person for the contact from that partner. They now pay a share of the annual cost of the website and software licensing. Short-term partnerships, which I'll get into in a moment, are an option. Over the past 15 years, for those of you who have been playing with it for that long, you have noticed that the site content has changed somewhat. The photos have been joined by oral histories, documents, moving images, and objects. The objects are actually courtesy of a lot of the museums, like the State Library, the State Museum, and the UA Museum of the North, who wanted to join in and get some of their catalogs available through this resource too. For about the last 10 years, we've been entering things post-1959 instead of just pre-1959. And we're currently sitting, I want to say there'll be a number up in a moment, we're currently sitting at about 98,000 items in the digital archives, which I think is just ginormous. One of the other things that's changed somewhat is in the early years, UAS, Alaska and Polar Regions Collections, handled all of the reference emails that came to the email address. About 3 years ago, that switched over to us because we thought that had been a burden on UAS for, far too long, and so we should share it a little bit. The intent was move it around from year to year, but that didn't really happen. So we're currently handling that here at UAA. The governing board still consists of reps from UAF, UAA, and the State Library, mostly because no other partner has stepped up who is willing to take on an annual subscription cost. The software platform, Content DM, when we started it, was a product of the University of Washington. It got bought out by OCLC. And just this past fall, we switched from hosting our own website and software up at UAF to OCLC hosting. Surprisingly, unlike everything else from OCLC, this has actually brought us a significant cost reduction. 2 years ago, the annual cost for just the website, that's the software licensing and website maintenance, that doesn't include scanning, that doesn't include selection, that doesn't include metadata, was approximately $65,000 a year. Last year, that cost was reduced to $28,000, and it will probably drop below $20,000 a year for the next several years. Some of this is because the OCLC hosting does relieve us of the need to have UAF system administrators paid for by the time they spend. And some of it is with the project manager switching from Bob to me. With me as a faculty member, it comes under the service component of my university workload, so we're not charging the project for my time, unless it starts taking over 20% of my time, in which case we'll have to. So that's the crazy administrative summary and organizational history. As you can see, that looks a little bit like a finding aid that I'm writing here, but there you go. So next up, what's the next slide? Let's see. Okay, scope and content notes, since I'm doing this in finding aid format. What's up? First of all, there has to be some sort of Alaska Connect. We've been a little vague on this, especially like Gold Rush, if it's Dawson, the Klondike Gold Rush era. I kind of feel like that rule hasn't been broken, just a little bent. The content doesn't have to have occurred in Alaska, but the connection should be there. Within that really generic framework, there's a room for a lot. Famous people, infamous people, unknown people, photos without people, Alaska culture, Alaska life, Alaska industry development. There aren't a lot of generic scenery shots, but people really aren't looking at the digital archives for that kind of image anyhow. They tend to go to stock image. I have no idea what the next slide is. Can I see that?
Sure.
There we go. Yes, that's exactly where I wanted to be. Brilliant. So here's the things that you shouldn't find. You shouldn't find content with zero relationship to Alaska. By the way, if you spot any of this, will you please let me know? We had some in our early meetings, we convened a board of scholars and elders from the Alaska Native community to advise us on some selection choices and some phrasing choices for metadata. And one of the things that became clear is, over the course of those meetings is human remains, images or whatever of human remains were not appropriate for inclusion. Not all Alaska Native groups feel this way about it, but that has somewhat become something of an international standard to not put images of human remains online. So it's just a flat out rule for the project. You should also probably not be seeing images of human nudity. Our audience for the digital archives does include minors, and so we try to make sure there aren't any questions of us getting on shaky legal ground. The project really can't afford attorneys, and we don't want to spend the time to deal with that either. It's kind of one of those common sense rules, also like with putting up images of physical violence. I think that has a lesser legal risk, certainly, than nudity, but we advise partners to think of our user audience when selecting materials to go online. Other items with sensitive content might include things like, there were a lot of years there where anthropologists went out and recorded songs and dances and things like that from Alaska Native groups that really were not intended for the public eye. They had a limited audience. These things were not really done with consent as they should have been. We advise no on those sorts of things. Generally, it's supposed to be about archival materials, which means it's going to skew away from published materials, with the exception of state government publications, not only because they're usually not seen the light of copies, but the other massive problem with documents like that is the interface for PDF within Content VM stinks. That's the politest way I can put it. It's horrible. I don't like it. It's even worse now, and we're having to figure out how to tell people how to access them. Also because once we switched over to OCLC hosting for the website, as you might expect, what they charge us now is not by item count, but by volume of megabytes our materials take up, and PDFs tend to be a little larger than normal low-resolution images. So what you will find on the digitized items are metadata fields. Hopefully some of you have looked at records in the digital archives. Some of those are structured, some of them are not. Some may have varying degrees of completeness in how well they're filled out. Some are searchable, some are not. Some are visible, some are not. You, of course, won't see things that are invisible. Things like that might be the date it was uploaded. And all the metadata kind of falls into two categories: descriptive metadata and administrative metadata. The descriptive metadata includes fields like the title of the item, the description, the textual description, subject fields, location, date, personal names, those sorts of things. Administrative metadata includes things like the unique identifier assigned to each item, collection name, holding repository contact information, ordering and use leak. And all of that metadata is Dublin Core linked. And if you don't know what Dublin Core is, feel free to shoot me an email and I'll shoot you a link to the Dublin Core stuff. And that's very much a sign of the time in which we started it, that Dublin Core was the winning kind of metadata choice we selected. What you also won't find is this is not meant to be an interpretive history website. The items will generally just have the information about what is depicted in the image and document or whatever the case may be. They're probably not going to have extensive background information about the individual's names, long histories of the towns that are depicted. It's kind of like when you're writing a biographical note, a finding aid to a collection. You're probably, hopefully, you're not going to put in extensive biographical information that is not reflected in the actual content of the collection. Can you click to the next slide? Because I'm trying to see if, like I said, there we are. Well, you've seen that. Okay. There's a technical requirements note here. Generally, items are relatively low resolution. This is primarily for bandwidth. We want the site to be as accessible as possible to Alaskans. even those without wonderful internet access. That includes Anchorage most days for me. It's also because in many cases the partners expressed early on a need or a wish to exert some control over the use of the materials, and so they didn't want to put up publication quality images because that would kind of remove that ability to control what happened to them. It's really hard. Another reason related to that is it's because then things get used without you knowing about it, and then it's really tough for you to go to whoever your resource allocator is to say, there's all this use of it, when you can't actually point to the use of it because somebody has just run off with your publication quality image. But primarily it's about reducing bandwidth requirements. Okay, next slide, please. Let's see what we've got. I feel like I'm a slide behind on everyone. There I am. I am a slide behind on everyone. Let's hop to the next one. There we go. Rights and restrictions. Not everything that goes up has to be free of copyright restrictions. The partner institutions do have some security in that this is not a commercial venture, so the risk of copyright infringement penalties is low. And the software also, if you get a cease and desist order, it's really easy to take materials down in a matter of seconds to minutes. Most of you know how many collections you have that include orphaned works that are well within their copyright period, and how tracking down the ownership of those rights is pretty much an insurmountable obstacle most days. We've left it up to the individual institutions to decide for themselves what their risk level should be when selecting content to go online. Let me give you a quick example. So we've put a lot of photos online here at UAA from anonymous collections of World War II soldiers. My predecessor used to purchase a lot on eBay. So these came with, we own the physical property, obviously, because we purchased the collection, but they don't come with any rights properties alongside that. We also tend not to put up entire collections. We choose to be selective. By the way, I don't purchase collections. I don't think that's ethical, but that's a different webinar. Within our collections, so we put up selections. We know we can take them down really quickly if we get a copyright challenge. You know, it's, for us, that's an acceptable risk. And a risk I won't take is, for example, we have collections like we have the Ferrandi organization's records here. And for many years, Ward Wells, a local Anchorage photographer, took photos for the Ferrandi org, and those are in the collection. Now, we don't, in the collection, have any of Ward's contracts with the Ferrandi org. So we don't know if he was doing it as a contractor, if the rights transferred to the Ferrandi org, if he kept the rights to his image. We really don't know what the status of that is. And since the Anchorage Museum actually does own the Ward Wells photograph collection and they have rights to it, we have chosen not to put any of the Ward Wells photographs that crop up all over our holdings, no matter how beautiful they may be. We would never do that without consulting with the Anchorage Museum first. So again, that's a risk we're not willing to take. Let's see. Let's pop to the next slide. Yeah, okay. So the thing you have to remember when using it is that it's not really a comprehensive reflection of archival content in Alaska. It's a pretty good, I see somebody just asked a question about Angeli. That's a really good question about ADA being an organization in its own right. Sort of, kind of, maybe. It's currently under the umbrella of the Alaska Library Network. I meant to say that. I apologize for not having said that. Digital archives is a great jumping off point to find materials. This is a good thing to know when you're working with users, end users of these. New things are being added all the time, as you could, jeepers, 98,000 items. That's just crazy. I never thought we'd get there. I thought 40,000 when we hit that about 5 years ago or 10 years ago was enormous. So let's take a quick look at the screenshots on the next slide. of the main page. Some of you may have noticed that's changed a little bit in the last, maybe couple of weeks. One of my colleagues here put that pretty little Alaska's Digital Archives banner on it and the photograph. Basic web work means that Alaska's Digital Archives banner always clicks back to the main homepage. Actually, if you flip to the next slide, I started drawing on the homepage, as you can see. And then there's a keyword search box on all pages. If you could pop to the next slide. There we go. And then there's a menu bar in the upper right. And that menu bar does actually show up on the mobile versions of this as well. These links here are also available at the bottom of each page. We're going to be expanding that pretty soon to include some FAQs. Hopefully, we have a number of those written, but if you have a question that always occurs to you when using the digital archives, please send that to me and we will add that to the FAQs if we have a good answer for it. Maybe not. Okay, next slide. Advanced search. It's under that search bar. That's really, it's something of a misnomer, as most advanced searches are. If you click to the next slide, you'll see what you get when you click on that button. And you can select collections. So if you want to look at 3 organizations' collections, or if you don't want to look at anybody but your own, this is one way of doing it. You can search within specific metadata fields there. You can also do some date searching. That is super quirky and unreliable. I would honestly almost never use that. There's been some technical glitches in the setup of some people's collections, which makes this basically a very unreliable search. You could try it, but don't assume you're getting a comprehensive listing of everything related to that date if you use that field. Next slide. I'm going to show you there the search terms. This is another fun part. Some of these are great field searches. The title, you can search within the title field. You can search within the description field, the creator field, and then it starts getting a little loopy, like relation and coverage. And to be honest, I haven't quite figured out which fields those are mapping to. And I see that location doesn't appear to be there, which makes all of us a little nuts. And so we're trying to figure out how to get that fixed, but that may be a while yet. And that has unfortunately been the status for a very long time. That's actually pretty high up on my, when I take over as project manager, list of things to get sorted out. Next up. Let's see. Okay, at the bottom of the main page, you can see if you scroll down on the Alaska's Digital Archives website, you will also see the major partner links. There's 2 pages of these. If you click on any one of those, you will actually just be searching within that collection when you start typing in terms in the search box. So that's really good to know. If you go in that way, you're not searching everybody's stuff. You're just searching the University of Alaska Fairbanks, or you're just searching the state archives and so forth. Next slide. We do have some upcoming changes that I know about. The pathways pages on the main, links from the main page are going away. They don't really function well, and from everything I hear, they're really not being used. We also, as much as we love the photo of the float plane on the lake, we would like that to probably over time represent each of the partners. So we're working on making that a rotating photo. Okay, next slide. Here's the part you're all here for, I think. Partnership levels. So that's the short and sweet of it on the slide. Let me talk a little bit about what these different partnership levels mean. The sustaining partner this means you're paying an annual cost depending on how much stuff you have in. Currently, that's based on total items. That's probably going to change in a couple of years because since we're no longer being charged by item count but by volume count. But first, we want to give an opportunity to those institutions that have a lot of audio-visual materials in to potentially consider hosting those on another site, like if it's a movie, sticking it on YouTube. There's a couple of reasons for that. one of which is they're pretty voluminous. I don't think the viewing thing is real great. And you can't put a URL in the digital archives and use that as your item, which you then catalog. So it actually works out pretty niftily to do that. Currently, based on number, UAA's share of the current cost is, we have just over 20% of the content. We're paying about $7,000 a year. If we went to basing it on the volume of the materials we have in, because we've got mostly low resolution JPEGs, we'd be paying less than $1,000 a year, and that would really wham institutions like the University of Alaska Fairbanks, because their film archives has a lot of material in, and suddenly UAF would be paying about 80% of the cost. And we don't want to do that to UAF with no warning. So we're offering them the opportunity to take some time to move those to different platforms, put in a URL in place of it, and then see if we can get the overall cost of the project subscriptions down a bit. What the sustaining partnership gets you is membership on the governing board. That comes with some decision-making powers. It also currently pays for attendance, travel, and food for our once-a-year in-person, face-to-face meeting of the governing board members, which usually is a few hours, and lunch, which is nice. It also means that when the main email address for the digital archives gets an offer of a collection, which happens once every couple of weeks, the sustaining partners kind of get first crack at taking people up on those offers of collections. Second is the project partner. This is for people who have a fair number of items but can't really afford to work it into the budget to pay annually. So you pay a one-time $3,000 cost, and that gets you up to 2,000 items that can go in. You can repeat this. The Anchorage Museum has done several of these projects over time now. There's actually one, and there's no timeline on when you put your stuff in. There is one partner who paid their $3,000 fee, I want to say about 5 years ago, and has not yet put anything in. It's still hanging out there. I'm not going to tell you who it is, but that's an option. And then there's the micro partners. This is a one-time $150 cost for up to 200 items. This is not a repeatable project thing, and it also, where the project partners get their own bucket, their representation on the main screen with, this is our collections, our materials, and our collections here. The micro partners aren't shared one of those, so you don't. It makes it a little more difficult to highlight just your collections. But the intent for the micro partner is because there's a lot of community organizations out there that really don't have a significant budget for putting things online, and this gives them an option to do at least a little bit at a not break the bank price, and we haven't had a lot of people looking at that yet, but we did want to offer that as an option.
So, Arlene, there's two questions. One is from Jolene,
yeah,
which it says, when you say subject to change, how long are these particular prices good for?
The prices are set through the next year at least, so that would be through June of 2020. After that, I'm not sure. I don't know how much of a hurry the current sustaining partners will be in to change that price structure. It's been in place for a very long time. I think if the cost of the project were to change substantially, either downward or upward, we might have to reconsider those costs, but I'm figuring for another year and a half, it'll probably be this.
Okay, and the second question is for me. The question is, do partners have to be organizations? Can individuals contribute?
The short answer to that is no, individuals can't contribute, but I want to talk a little bit more about that because that's a super important question. And part of that is because of the obligations incumbent upon the partner. So let's flip to the next slide and I can start talking about some of those things. Okay, here's the capacity that has to be happen at the partner level. There has to be somebody who can do a reference response. That's actually the most significant problem with having an individual be a partner in this project. This is really intended to be something that is a chance for archives and libraries and museums to highlight their collections. This means somebody who will answer emails coming back to the institution asking for a copy. That's a very hard commitment for a non-organization to make kind of in perpetuity. What I would actually suggest in that case is that an individual who has materials that may be appropriate for inclusion on the digital archive talk to one of the partners and work out some sort of donation deal with a partner where the partner holds high-resolution copies, can be the archives for that individual, and gives them some ability to act in that reference capacity, the duplication capacity. We have taken in collections of scanned materials where the person has retained the original, and we've put them up on the digital archive. We handle any questions of funding costs, duplication costs, things like that. That's all worked out in our deed of gift with them. They retain copyright, but they allow us to act as if we hold copyright or as an agent on their behalf. So that's one way to get around that. And that's really what I would suggest, is that it goes through a partner instead of an individual. There's really no capacity with with what's happened in the digital archive so far for really a person to do it on their own. Let's see. You do have to be able to handle requests. Each partner is responsible for their own digitization and selection and metadata. Having said that, you can contract that out. We have done actually here at UAA, we've done a couple of contracts already for the Alaska Resources Library, also known as ARLIS, where they've done their digitization, but we've done the selection and we've done the metadata. They've gotten grant funding or internal funding to do a project, and they host the files, they answer the ref requests, but we did the actual physical work of taking it online on a contract basis. They paid us for that. There are some technical requirements like the low-res images. Now, if you decide that you don't want to contract this out with one of the partners for the metadata, that sort of thing, if you want to do it in-house, a partner does also have the obligation, though, to either work with one of the sustaining partners to get somebody who will train them on doing metadata, because there are metadata guidelines that do have to be followed. It's not super tough. I don't think so anyway, but since people have an obligation to follow the standards, we do offer training, and so a partner wanting to join up would have some obligation to at least sit through some of that training with one of us. At the moment, that probably actually means one of the three of us here at UAA, because we're the people doing the vast majority of it, and we're currently the ones who have had the most formal training on the metadata guidelines. If you want to do the scanning yourself, you're welcome to do that. If scanning is a bit of a new concept for you, if you haven't done a lot of it, you want some hands-on training with that or some quick tutorials, any partner is able to do that with you as well. One of the other things, you do need a person or a physician who will be the project liaison. No, the metadata guidelines are not a step toward creating a master vocabulary for Alaska collections. We would never be so presumptuous. Now, there are some options there, and certainly we'd like to see them considered, but that's never been a statewide discussion, and we haven't really pushed that ourselves. If somebody else wants to start that discussion, we'd be happy, all of us, I think, would be happy to participate. Back to the person or physician who will be the project liaison, it doesn't have to be long-term stuff. There needs to be somebody that if something goes suddenly awry with the collections, that either the project manager can call or send other people to call, who will be at the institution, who will be that person who knows what's going on, potentially can log in, fix whatever it is, or give the information to the project manager to do the tweaks that need to happen. This is actually an interesting question because I emailed Bob a couple of weeks ago and said, okay, there's however many partners, who are the contact people at all of those? And he honestly didn't have them for quite a few of them because because the people have moved on from the institutions they were at, and because nothing had gone wrong with the project in the meantime, nobody had had me to contact them. That's actually on my list of after July 1st, I'll be contacting each of the current partner institutions to get current contact information for them. One reason is actually this next point. Well, this is another obligation for each partner. You are supposed to have a specific page on your own website that's a landing page. It goes in the ordering and use link field. And it should talk about how to order things, if somebody comes in and wants to get a duplicate or wants to be able to use it, some basic rights information if you want to put that in. I included 2 URLs here of 2 of the places I think have done a pretty good job of that. I was actually a little surprised when I went in to look at these, at how many of our partners didn't have them or that were 404 errors. So that's the next thing on my list for July 1st. I will be contacting the partners and saying, hey guys, we need this. Because I think it's really important. If we want to encourage people to contact us when they use materials, we have to make it easy for them to contact us. So that's going to become a quick priority for a lot of our partners. I hope. I may not win that one. The other thing you want to kind of getting back to the reference response. You need to understand if you want to partner that 2 things are basically going to happen. First of all, that some people will take materials off the digital archives and run off with it and use it for something, and you will never ever find out about that use. They may or may not cite things appropriately, whatever. You're just not going to hear about it. That's a given. If that's not acceptable to your organization, you might want to think long and hard about joining up. The other thing that will happen is that you will get calls and emails. You'll be fielding requests related to what you put online. Those may be reproduction requests from reality TV show researchers who funded my supplies budget for a couple of years. Some of those may be cranky out-of-staters who yell at you about your location identifications and seem to think you're part of some vast conspiracy to provide misinformation about something. If that seems strangely specific, I dealt with that guy last year over several months, and until I got tired of him calling me a liar and an idiot, both of which are terms he actually used. And I told him I wasn't interested in continuing any further communication with him if he wasn't ever going to listen to me or be willing to accept that I wasn't deliberately trying to lie to him. It just didn't seem to be going anywhere. You will also get people who burst into tears on seeing a family photo from their childhood that was actually taken by a visitor to their community because nobody in the community had a camera at the time, and so they have no family photos, and they didn't even know this photo existed. I actually received in the mail the other day a story knife from a woman who had tripped across a photo of herself and her 3 sisters and her brother as children in Bethel. Playing with story knives out in the yard, and her sisters and her brother are all gone. They all died before the age of 40. She's in her 50s now, and it was just an amazing experience for me, and it really touched my heart to be able to talk to her about that and get her better copies of those photos. That will happen. So for every guy who calls you a liar, you have this wonderful woman who is just incredibly touched by what she's been able to find online. You will get people who find that photo, that group photo of people in Savunga from 80 years ago, and who will send it to their relatives in Savunga and get every single one of those people identified. It's brilliant. And you don't even know how they found the photo in the first place because you have no information on it. You'll get reproduction requests from museums in Europe or the Centers for Disease Control. We've had both of those who want to use one of your images, or the Shoe Museum in Toronto, of all things. You'll get requests from authors, from students, from artists, from Star Trek fan club members. Yes, that one happened too. And your researchers will be coming from many disciplines, some high-end academic, right down to people who were just randomly Googling something and tripped across the photo and thought it was cool. from B&B owners who want to stick some Alaska photos up on the walls of their bread and breakfast place. Can you potentially put up photos with watermarks? We don't advise watermarks. There is a banding option. You should be seeing it on most of the photos you see online, that there's a band across the bottom. Those do download with it. Of course, anybody with a lick of ability in Photoshop can remove them pretty easily, but the choice was the banded part over a watermark because we wanted to be, because photos can be so variable, a watermark couldn't always be put in the same place on every photo, and that got to be way too much work for us when we were doing production level of scanning. It just got to be impossible. So the band was kind of our midway point on that. I don't think anybody would say no to watermarks, but I would advise you strongly to make sure that it doesn't affect what is visible in the image itself for the end user. There's going to be limits to what can happen. We have been known to send out images in response to requests, high-end ones, with watermarks where we were fairly sure that the end user wasn't going to comply by our citation standards. But there have not been any images in the digital archives that have gone in with watermarks that I know of. Let's see the next slide, because I feel like I've talked for 100 years at a very high rate of speed. Is there next? Oh, yes, this is where I want to end. It is fundamentally an outreach tool for you. It is hopefully about keeping a user orientation, and if you're finding as a user it's not meeting your needs, I do want to hear about it. We may not be able to correct that, but we get limited feedback. For an institution, though, I mean, I never really realized the audiences we would reach with the digital archives. I guess I wasn't really expecting the reality TV show people to be using it as heavily as they did there for a time. It's also about deciding what you can do. We all have a lot of work and very limited time to do it in. The interesting side effect of putting materials up in the digital archives that I didn't realize would happen when I was hiring archivists was it was an amazing lesson to the people who started working for me and for me. It was a quick way to learn the collection in a way you really don't get to learn them. I mean, there's not very many days where you're getting to touch documents in a collection at this level, and doing the metadata for an image forces you to look at an image one by one and really spend some time, and you start learning the content of collections. For reference purposes, that's been invaluable. But it's also time you're not spending doing other things, which can be a bit of a challenge. But do also think about the support it can bring in, what it might enable for you. We have, very early on, we were told, well, I was told, put up the low-hanging fruit. Put up the photos that have a ton of description, so it's really easy to do the metadata. And to be honest, my collections don't have a lot of low-hanging fruit, so I said, okay, can't do that. I started putting up photos that I knew were Alaska, I thought were cool, I thought people would want to use, that had next to no identifications. And within the next week, I started getting identifications on them. I don't know how people find them. I don't know how they get there, especially when there's 98,000 items in the database. I don't know how they're pulling up that one image. But we get regular identifications. There's even a group on Facebook dedicated to doing this, not just with the digital archives, but with other sources of photographs. And there's quite a bit of information that comes in. And that's all information you can feed back into your collection description, which will make it more searchable online. So it's been a really cool experience. It some days feels a lot longer than 15 to 17 years, I will admit. But I have just dumped a ton of information on you at very high speed. And I'm sure some of that was unintelligible because right now I'm very much in my own head. So I want to give you guys as much time to start asking me questions as we can get in the next however long we have.
So Arlene, I'm going to jump in because I got a comment from Freya about my keyboarding. But because we have you on the phone, we can't have you talk any other way, so I can't really mute myself. So my question is, do you have any potential partners lined up that would be interesting for us to know about?
Well, I've had a couple of inquiries from organizations. One is that I think I can talk about this. I hope I can talk about this. Is the Tuzzy Library. Many of you may know that they did a digitization project with the Tundra Times records a while back. And all of the photos and the photomorphs for the Tundra Times they had up in a database on their website. It is based on a software that really hasn't been updated in some time. And they have been for a very long time talking about whether there's something will come of that. I don't know. I know they're going for grant funding in hopes to move those photographs in. So that would be a really cool partnership that I know of. As some of you may know, the Kodiak Historical Society at the Baranof Museum has recently joined in with some new materials. I'm trying to think. The Alaska Moving Image Preservation Association, I think, only has 1 or 2 items in. We're working with them to maybe get some of their stuff that they've already got up on YouTube cataloged and in as URLs to get their presence a little better. I'm not really aware of anybody else that's standing out there hopping up and down in the wings wanting to join, but if you hear of anybody, do feel free to send them my way.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, Arlene, this is Angelie. I received a couple of questions beforehand from one of the Alaska Digital Stewardship Intensive participants who couldn't attend today. So she is wondering, you talked about this a bit, but what is the process to actually sign up to be a partner? Do you just pay the fee and agree to the considerations that you noted, or is there some other more formal application process, or how does one go about becoming a partner?
Basically, you start by contacting me. The funding is currently being run through the Alaska Library Network. So when if the organization needs like an invoice, if you're going for grant funding or an estimate, we can get that written up and out to you. The short version is how it's happened the last couple of times is the Alaska Library Network has just basically sent out an invoice to the partner in question to get the payment taken care of, and then one of the partners has started work. One of the sustaining partners, I think the last one was actually Fairbanks, Bob specifically, started working with the incoming partner to get the training taken care of and to get things going. There's some behind the scenes stuff that has to happen, like we have to, depending on whether you want to do the work or you want to have it hired out to one of the partners, in terms of getting like permissions to add materials, the permissions to log into the database and actually upload things and edit things within your bucket, that kind of thing. It takes a little bit to set up the collection. Unfortunately, Content DM has always used the term collection for an organization, and in archival terms, that's a little charged because we tend to also use the word collection to refer to a specific collection, not an institution. So we tend to call them buckets just to save ourselves some time. So every organization has a bucket, but they have collections within those buckets. So if you hear me using the term bucket, it sounds stupid, I know, but that's what's going on. That generally takes, I will be honest, I'm not sure what that's taking time-wise right now because I don't know how responsive OCLC is to responding to our requests for more of those. And I haven't had to create one of them myself, so I don't know how much of that is going to be within my power or something OCLC is going to have to do for us. We are currently one of the bigger partners left in Content DM. A lot of people are exiting Content DM for things like Islandora and a few others. That's potentially out there too, although I don't think any of us want to face the concept of exporting all that data right now and massaging it into a new system. That would be a grant-funded project if that were to ever happen. We haven't had the courage yet, and I don't see it happening anytime soon. It's pretty informal, I will admit. It wasn't even really until a couple of years that we even decided, oh, this is called the governing board. It's been pretty casual. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but running it through ALN is how we put at least an organization on it, because the digital archive in and of itself is not an organization. And that's something we frequently tell people when we respond to reference requests, because people write them in email and ask for things from multiple different people or organizations, and we're like, there's no central point of reference for all the archives in the state. And that's sometimes a bad thing, that's sometimes a good thing, but you're going to need to contact these each individually to find out, because everybody's policies and processes are different. We don't want to force organizations that may have differing policies on use of their materials or fees into one kind of centralized thing. That's not the point of this. It was set up deliberately to allow the partners as much flexibility as possible for their own procedures and to be able to retain them.
Thanks. I'm also wondering about something considering the back end of all of it. It sounds like then once someone becomes a partner, they could then upload their own content, or they can send it to you to upload. Is that the case?
Yeah, I mean, if they wanted to send it to us to be uploaded, we'd probably have to talk about some sort of fee on that, depending on how much. Generally, I do encourage people to do their own, mostly because I think they know more about it than anybody else, and it's a good learning opportunity to learn your own collections. But sometimes that's just not possible. You may not actually have staffing. You may have only volunteers who can do this sort of thing, and you may or may not want to task them with that. You may have high turnover, any number of things. So it varies. It really needs to be what the partner's able to do, and, I'm not going to be volunteering our institution to do a ton of these contracts because, there's 3 people here. We still need to do our own work. And as much as my boss likes being able to offset payroll to contracts, it's time we're not doing, doing our own stuff. So it's just going to vary on capacity. Sorry about that background noise. It sounded like somebody dropped something on my head. That was loud.
So there's another question, actually, Arlene. The question here says that there used to be an element that allowed for user contribution for the metadata, and is there a possibility for crowdsourcing to provide better access through descriptions?
Run that by me again. I'm sorry. I was losing you.
No, it's fine. So it says here, didn't there used to be an element that allowed for user contribution for metadata? And is there a possibility for crowdsourcing to provide better access through descriptions?
Yeah, technically, well, it used to. I haven't looked lately. Technically, for a while, their content VM was playing around with allowing user tagging. That was a discussion of some level of heatedness among the partners a few years ago. There were a lot of concerns, especially with the Alaskan, given some of the feedback we've gotten from the Alaskan Native Advisory Board, that having unmoderated public commenting on the pictures might not be the world's most useful thing. And at that time, nobody was really willing to spend the time to moderate on the site itself. That doesn't mean you can't do it. We frequently use our UAA social media outlets to post images or whatever and say, hey, want to transcribe this document for us? Want to transcribe this audio clip for us? Want to, hey, do you recognize this town? And when we get the information, we do put it back in. One of the strongly suggested requirements is if you do get an identification, and this did come directly out of the Native Advisory Board, was to attribute any information that went into the record. So if you're looking at a description, you'll often see title taken from caption or information taken from caption or identification provided by this person. And that way, if there was some argument, if some family members decided to get in a fight over your photo and whether that was Aunt Elsie or Granny Elsie, Elma or whatever the case may be. I do have an Aunt Elsie, actually. That way it was clear who was saying, because we've had a few of those. We've had a photo where the person in it has been identified in 3 different ways. And so we just kind of take that step back. We're not going to declare a winner. We'll say so-and-so said this person said that, and that person over here said this. And we tell the end user what that is. It also did save me in this argument with this guy who was yelling at me about the fact that I was a liar and an idiot because he said it wasn't this place. And he was insisting I'd gotten that information from a more recent user of the image. And I was like, no, that wasn't original metadata. It says right there, this came from information in the collection, not from one of our end users. So we do feed that back in. Records are pretty easy to edit. So we try to get that in as much as possible.
Okay, we're almost at 3 o'clock. Are there any more questions?
I'm hearing dead silence. Well, y'all know how to reach me. I hope. I certainly hope. So if you have any questions or you need to kind of just chit-chat about some of this, I feel like I've done a total brain dump on you. Okay, I have done a total brain dump on you. Just contact me. If there's something that's making you a little nervous or you think it's a dumb idea, I'm happy to hear it. I may not agree. I may have to take it to a larger group to discuss. But we would love to have more partners. It would be very cool. I mean, this is a pretty established platform at this time. It's got an audience of about 12,000 people a month using it. So it'd be, the more we can get in and the more stuff, the more we can tap an audience that's already out there and that's using us.
Arlene, I do have a question actually. Since this is about this whole course is about digital preservation, what is are these hosted? Information is all hosted on a server at UAF, or what's the kind of backup scenario for this information and these digital assets?
Well, the site itself is not that huge. So yeah, in the past there has been backups at UAF. OCLC is offering the backups now because that's part of their hosting service. As for like the master files and that sort of thing, that's very much up to the individual partner to handle that for themselves. There is no central repository of everybody's image files. Nobody really had the money to be responsible for that. For the group as a large, and none of us were willing to pay for that. That one ends up being on the partner to figure out. To be honest, here at UEA, we don't even do massive digital files unless there's a preservation or a request to do so. We are scanning low res, putting online low res, and then waiting for the request to come in. We realized we were spending so much time scanning high resolution images and taking up a ton of server space for images and then never got requested, and for which the originals were in beautiful condition, and we weren't worrying about them disintegrating in the next 5 years. So we made the deliberate choice to save the server space now, save the time now, and then when a request comes in, that's when we come up with a master image as per the request. But others are doing it totally differently. Others are still doing massive files and saving them because they have the ability to do that. They have the capacity within their own org. That just wasn't something that we could do here.
Are there any other questions out there?
All right. Well, thank you, Arlene. It's really, really informative, and I really appreciate it. Okay, we're going to stop the recording, and thanks, everybody.